Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling Beyond the Pulpit with the Good News Gang. We are so glad that you joined us today for another conversation, and I am your host, Pastor Matt West from Marble Memorial United Methodist Church in lovely Milan, and I am joined by my tag team partners, Pastor Jackie Ranieri from Clare UMC, Pastor Kim Metzer from Hope and Welcome Corners UMC in the Hastings area, and Pastor Curtis Clark from Marysville UMC. And hopefully the next time we get together, Pastor Matt will be able to join us. But as we all know, in the life of being a pastor, things happen and schedules change. So life it is. Yep. Well, how's everybody doing since it's been a little while since we got together?
I know seems like a long time. I was trying to remember the last time I was on here.
70.
It's been a while.
I'm like, man, it's been a while since I've been out.
Out of practice. You don't know.
Summer gets busy somehow.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Unfortunately, it's not like, no disrespect to teachers, but it's not like we get June, July, and August, to,
right.
Do whatever. So
it would be nice to have that.
Yeah, it would.
So Curtis still has kids at home. Have they started back yet?
No, they go back the day after Labor Day, so the 7th.
Oh, good. They're holding to the traditional start.
Yep.
Claire started on Monday. Our kids.
Hastings started on Monday. Our granddaughter started last week. She's in Howell. Just from you. Yeah.
They've been back.
Mask or no mask in your schools?
Ours are no mask.
They're
not
mandated. Yeah, except on the bus.
Gotcha. It's interesting how that conversation's going around in many school districts.
Yep.
Well, speaking of controversial topics, we've brought another one to you this week. Actually, this is part 2 of our last conversation where we discussed 10 church activities that need to go. And so we worked through the first half of this list, and we're hoping that today we can work through the next part of it. And so we're picking up at number 6 on this list, which is fill in the blank Bible studies. So we had some different thoughts, and I'm going to ask, because we were talking about this before we started recording today, I'm going to ask both Pastor Kim and Pastor Curtis to share their thoughts on what exactly the writer means by this particular point that they put in their article.
My initial take, and I was like Matt, I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, what are they talking about? Fill in the blank Bible studies. But what I came to the conclusion, and Curtis has another conclusion, which is really great. But my initial conclusion was oftentimes we get these workbooks with all church Bible studies, or even we might do it on our own, and we give our small groups a fill in the blank based on the sermon or on some other something that we come up with or is in the workbook. And that's all that the small group does is read the scripture and then fill in the blank in their workbook or their worksheet. Mm-hmm. And there's no real relationship building there. It's just, okay, what goes in this blank? And then, what did you get for that blank? And instead of talking about what is going on in our lives, we're just trying to fill in the blanks. Yeah. So that's what I got out of it. But I really like what Curtis came up with as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kim. And I agree, because it becomes very almost elementary at that point, like you're back in, 4th grade and you're going through your workbook. But I think too, one of the things that they're trying to get at is, and I think we've all seen this and experienced it, is and this is not to say that we shouldn't be studying scripture and that we shouldn't be doing studies. We should be. But that's only part of it. We need to be doing these studies and learning scripture and having these conversations and wrestling with scripture as well, and asking people in our group these difficult questions, but then also taking what we've learned and putting it into practice, into our faith, into the life of the church, into the life of our community. Because to simply sit and have conversation or fill in the blank and gain knowledge is fantastic. But if we don't do anything with that knowledge, then it's just for our own use.
Yeah.
It only benefits us.
Right.
These lessons of the gospel, this ministry of Jesus, the work of the Holy Spirit is to benefit the greater good, the greater community. And so I think, and I am all for, in that small group setting of us really challenging ourselves and having those difficult conversations around, well, what does this mean? I don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And then working through that as opposed to just reading off a script and saying, okay, the answer to number 28 is,
Yep.
Whatever.
I had a high school teacher that referred to that as a regurgitation of information as opposed
Yes.
to actually learning it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And
Yeah,
I think
because if you put them out of order, do you still know what you just learned?
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because and I think one of the great things in that small group experience is being able to listen to the experiences of the other people in the group, because we all come from different points in life and different places and ages and experiences, and how we interpret and how we hear scripture, even, from when we were 20 years old or 25 years old to where we are now, or vice versa, it's different. And so we need to be open to how each of us are hearing it. And I think as pastors and teachers, if someone is getting way off course, we can kind of steer back into maybe what is an appropriate direction or a reasonable theological direction, but we should still be listening to what others are saying, for sure.
Right.
But I think, though, that this type of study, fill in the blanks, I mean, we've all been through them. We all kind of like roll our eyes at them and that. But I think they're really good, though, for a beginner, for someone who is just getting into the,
Yep.
they hear these words and they see these things and it's like, okay. But that's when, I think that's where the leader, whoever is taking the group, really needs to take it a step further. It's just not a gather time. Okay, good. I filled in the blanks and let's move on. Okay, let's fill in the blanks, but let's go back and talk about them. How do you use this in everyday life? How is this happening to you? And I think that is so, I, as a new beginner, we did that with the Book of Acts. I saw the movie and then we went and filled in the blanks and then we did that. But it was the discussions that happened within that really got me like, whoa, I'm missing the boat here somewhere. And I got to ask the questions, and it was just in a safe environment to ask that. But I think that, everybody learns in a different way. Some people, that's the only way they know how to learn is filling in the blanks, and that's how they take it. Some people have to speak it. Some people, we know there's all types of learning on this, but I think it's an important piece, even for those who've been in, this a while, that are into it. But go back and talk about it. Go back and study it. Why is it this answer? Not just, but too many times we just want to gather, fill in the blank, say we did it, and then move on to the next thing.
Right. So instead of getting rid of them entirely, we need to use them as a tool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and I think, one other point to add to this is hitting on that idea of building relationships. Well, if we're studying scripture, if we just do fill in the blank, then we're missing the opportunity to build on our relationship with God.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes, the people we're studying with, those relationships are certainly vital in terms of community that we're trying to be a part of and helping each other grow. But we also want to make sure that we maintain a focus on the one we should be, building our relationship with every day.
Right.
But and I see Jackie's point too. I mean, there was a book that I went through once called 30 Days to Understanding the Bible by Max Anders. But the idea was, even though he used the fill in the blank process, it built upon each lesson. So it was like, do you remember what, we discussed yesterday? And then we're adding to it today. And so it was a constant buildup to, basically through repetition to remember, the names of the books of the Bible and some of the main themes or what. But, I can see, both sides to the argument or what, but I'm looking more in terms of, what this writer's getting at to what Kim and Curtis hit on, and the fact that it's just again, a regurgitation of information. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
we're not connecting or learning at that point, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And, and again, I mean, we all learn differently, and but there are good ones out there, fill in the blanks, and there's awful ones out there, but there's also good studies, and there's also some horrid studies. I mean, and it all depends on how the leader takes it and how deep, it really depends how deep the group really wants to get. Because you can get into some groups and they're like, oh, this is too much. Who wants to do this? Let's talk about where we're going afterwards, or who wants to go out, and it depends on what the group, how deep the group wants to go, or how fluffy they want it to be.
Yep. Well, number 7 on this list of 10 church activities that need to go is gatherings for singles filled with non-singles. So the author of this article says it's great that your church has a ministry intended for singles to get together with other people in the same stage of life. It's not so great when the singles group at a church has become filled with people who are married. No, this isn't some bait and switch intentionally done by a church. Single people begin in the ministry, invest in the ministry, make friends in the ministry, and don't want to leave the ministry even when they're married. Single life is very different from married life in great ways and challenging ways. While there should be community between the two stages of life, it can be very beneficial to have a singles ministry at church, as long as that's what it really is. So, single groups filled with non-single people.
I think that to again expand on it, I think that applies to any of your ministries. Just like when you have a children's ministry, when they're no longer a child, when they're a high schooler, they're not allowed to, unless they're a volunteer, they're not allowed to be in the children's ministry anymore. So I think honor their time in that ministry, but graduate them out in some way.
I think it's a catch-22, because you'll have some people on one side of the fence that are like going, well, how come they get a group but like there's nothing for us, and
Right,
so I guess to me that would be the question is like, okay, well, is there a couples group so that they don't have to invade the singles group, or or do you just simply say, hey, we love that you'd like to be a part of this, but this is really intended for single people, not just young adults or something, so I mean there's a lot of variables, or the intention might be that it's for singles, but if you don't have that money or that many in your congregation, well then
why do you have it?
Do you continue to do it for maybe 2 or 3 single people, or do you maybe open the doors and maybe rename the group, so that, people don't feel excluded, and then there's something, for everybody. But yeah.
I think
I'm on the opposite end. Yes, I'm married, but my husband won't go to a couples group. That's just not his thing. And a lot of times it's in the evening when he was working. So it was like, okay, here I am. I love to get in a small group. I want to build relationships with people. So it's like I started hanging out with the single group because I got to go to the movies. I got to go to dinner. I got to go do things like that. Yes, I was married, but it was like, it just became, well, then the church kind of came up with a different idea. Yes, there was that married group, but they opened it up to other people who were like me, that were just, wanting to build relationship. And so we didn't get named. It wasn't a singles group. It wasn't a married group. It was just, who wants to come and learn this study? We did a study, and then we had, and they broke us up into clusters. Like we gathered together like once a month as a whole group. And then we got to choose as our cluster. So we could study at the church, or we can go to a restaurant, we can go to a coffee shop, and we built our small group there. But the problem we had there then was like, we became a married couple because there was like 8 of us, and we didn't want to separate when the next Bible study came, because we were so comfortable with each other. And it was like, no, we want to stay in our small group, but they switched us up. And that's like when they lost all kinds of people. Right. It was like, we want to be separated from that. We want to stay.
So you have to decide what you want your small groups to be. Do you want them to just be small groups where you change groups, maybe depending on the study, or are they life groups? Are they a group of people that do life together? Our very first small group at Redeemer, not my very first, but the one that I put together, I intentionally asked people who were in blended families and or had teenagers. And then we still get together on occasion, and not obviously as often as we used to. We still call ourselves a small group, even though we don't meet, but we ended up doing life together, even though, those of us that were in blended families are still in blended families. But our teenagers are clearly not teenagers anymore because it's been 15 years. Holy cow. So, yeah.
We would refer to people in your situation, Jackie, as spiritually single.
There you go.
That they're married, but then their spouse doesn't want to participate or attend.
I mean, that's a good way to do it. But it didn't, because it's awkward for me to go to a married couple group and I'm the only single one sitting there. I am married. I fall in your category there, but I don't have that other piece. But then it was like the other end, and they're like, "Well, you're married," and I'm like, I don't have a partner to go. So I mean, that's how I
don't you see it? It's right here.
But I had a blast with them. But and it's like I could relate to them. I could talk to them, and I built lifelong relationships with these people still. But but the hard part was when we got into that, like you would say, a life group, Kim, and it turned out that they separated us, and it was like, well, wait a minute, I've really depended on them, pushing me, or they depend on me for something else. It was just they lost the boat there because we probably became too cliquey for others to join us. So I mean, I get it, I really do now. I get it being a ministry, but at the time it was like, oh, how dare you do that to me.
I think there's a couple of things too to maybe expand upon. Is one, and I would love to have a large number of singles in the church that we could do this, is to really embrace that when you do have singles in your church, to embrace that and give them that opportunity to gather, because it is a much different journey in life than it is being married. But also to look at, I think when we think of singles, we initially and maybe automatically go to a younger crowd, but also acknowledging that there are people later in life who are single,
Right.
through divorce or through the death of a spouse. And are we looking at the 65 to 70-year-old man or woman who is now single because they've lost a spouse?
Right.
And is there, as opposed to calling it a widows group, and I think there's a way maybe to integrate that older person into that younger crowd too, as a mentor, as someone who could really help them with different challenges and aspects of life too. So I think there's always that great opportunity to kind of take that older, wiser experience and blend it with the usefulness of people who maybe are looking for a spiritual or even just a life mentor.
Yep.
Right.
All right. Well, hey, moving right along, number 8 on this list, outreach that doesn't serve your community. Outreach is a critical part of the church. I mean, even Jesus sent out the disciples, but do you know what else is critical? Knowing the community you're serving.
Absolutely.
I've seen this from town to town, where as opposed to like getting an idea of what the actual needs are of a community, people just assume what they are. And so then, they create a ministry and then wonder why the ministry isn't working or serving that many people, and not realizing that it's because that's not really a need of the community, but we're going to make it work.
Right.
Because we want to do it.
Right. Or we've always done it.
Yeah.
Always done it this way.
While maybe the needs and the demographics of the community has changed, we don't look internally and say, well, why are we doing this ministry? Who is it really serving? Is it really meeting the needs? Maybe it met the needs 10 years ago, but now the plant closed down, or a new plant has come in, or something has changed in the community to where that's not really needed anymore. Or maybe it needs to be changed a little bit to expand it upon. And if we're not doing that, then again, we're just serving ourselves.
Right. And kind of related is, oftentimes we do food drives for the food pantry, and people will donate things that they don't want anymore. And that's not sacrificial giving. If you're giving prunes that have expired just because you don't want them in your pantry anymore, what makes you think that someone visiting a food pantry will want those, or that they'll even be put on the shelf at the food pantry, because they won't.
Right.
It's not good enough for me, so it should be fine for someone else, right?
Exactly. Oh, everybody's going to want this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I moved into my current, community, I had people that told me that one of the issues in town was that we had a homeless problem. Now, typically, there's some evidence when you drive around town enough that you would see something that would indicate that that's a true
Not
statement.
necessarily.
Well, no, not necessarily. But then I also had to try and confirm, I had a conversation with the police chief, and he's like, we don't have a homeless problem. He said we have more of a transient problem because our community lies between Ann Arbor and Toledo. So usually if anybody shows up in our town, it's because they're trying to get from one to the other. And, he said, as far as in terms of a homeless situation in our community, it's more like, well, boyfriend screwed up with girlfriend and she kicked him out, and so he's sleeping on his buddy's couch or something for a couple of nights till they sort something, they sort out their problems. But he's like, as far as people living under, overpasses and camps that are set up in certain parts, he's like, we don't have it, but yet people assume, we have a homeless problem.
Right.
And it's not even always an assumption. So we run into that with Family Promise, is people, especially in this area, don't see the homelessness, because you don't. It is the couch surfing. It is, and we do have people living down by the river, but it looks different in different communities. And we're not going to be like Chicago, where they're leaning up against a building during the day. But we do have a significant homeless problem in this area. You just wouldn't know it. So I'll step off of that soapbox.
No, I think one of the benefits that we have as clergy who are itinerant to a certain degree is that we come into these new communities with these fresh eyes and even fresh ears. We should have those as well to listen and to see what's going on. And sometimes those conversations are difficult with the people in the church or the community who have been long time members and long time residents, to say, well, this is what I'm seeing and hearing, experiencing as someone brand new. And sometimes those are difficult conversations to have, because no one wants to hear that the place that they've been calling home for so long has a few bumps and bruises on it that maybe we see coming in, or that long held ministry that was started by Aunt B back in the 50s really isn't serving a purpose anymore.
No?
Right.
Well, it's taking the time to reevaluate what you're doing, because as we mentioned, a little bit ago in the conversation, what might have been the need of the community 10 years ago might not be the need now, and acknowledging that, as opposed to, for lack of better phrases, continuing to beat a dead horse,
and that's just a good practice in ministry, in business, in anything.
Yeah.
Right.
To always be looking at, what is our goal? What's our vision? Why are we doing this? And is there value in it?
Yeah.
And you find out pretty quickly. And, we've all been through and done it, ask the questions of people in the community, go outside of the church and ask the questions. Because I remember my first church, we had blankets like you would not believe. The women's group got together and they knitted and they quilted and they did we had all these blankets. Well, the nursing home's going to want them. The fire department's going to want them. Everybody's going to want one of our blankets. And I went there and I got laughed at, and, the nursing home took it. But when she opened up the closet, it was just like, everybody had that same idea. Everybody, all the old people want to have blanket. Yeah, exactly. So I said, I'm going to take these and I just, we came up with a different idea with it, and it worked out great for the church I was at. But there was a need, and I've shared with you guys before, there was a need for water for the fire department for when they had fires. There was such a need, because they're all volunteer firemen. There's no funds for them to have water, and they needed to be, I forgot the word, but they need to be hydrated, I should say, that they needed the water. So it was like we became the church that served them drinking water. And it was like, we served 5 different stations and that, but it took a lot of being humble to like listen to people, because no, we've got the service,
we've got the blankets.
Right.
Everybody's
Want one of our blankets because this one makes the best blankets in the area and everybody wants one of her blankets and blah, 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 which is great. But that was how many years ago, like you said, Curtis? I mean, it just takes that time, but it's listening to what people say, and it's, and you may get some, off the wall things that need to be done. And, maybe the church can't do it, but there's a way to bring the community into it and build relationships within the community of, getting together and other agencies and that. So
I'm glad you clarified, because I'd hate to call that fire department and find out they didn't have water. So
your house is burned down. We had no water.
Sorry.
Well, that's what everybody kept saying. Well, the fire department has water. And it's like, no, you're not understanding. You need to hydrate the firemen that are taking out the fire. And
I think sometimes too, going off of Curtis's earlier thought about those difficult conversations about what the actual needs are, I think sometimes what makes that conversation difficult is that people don't always want to acknowledge what the problem may be in the community.
Absolutely.
right.
It's like, no, that's not happening in our community. No.
Or they just don't want to change. I mean, I saw there's, a bunch of groups around here, like anywhere. We're getting a new Culver's. Yay. We're moving up. Anyway, but just talking about development in general, one of the comments was, why do we have to develop anything? Like, this is an interesting community. Love it. But a lot of people have been here their whole lives. So there's ones like that just don't see the need for anything new. They just don't see it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that, kind of what Matt was saying in a previous place I was serving, later in my appointment there, we were seeing an influence or an influx of opiate use and problems in the community. And it was very under the radar. But when I started talking with, school administrators and principals, it became very evident that in the small community that it was present, and there were a lot of people in the community, not the church, but in the community overall, who just put their head in the sand and say, nope, this is a small rural, town. That kind of thing doesn't happen here. That only happens down in the city. And, when you talk to the field directors and the people in who are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis of seeing not just younger people, but even middle-aged and older people dying from overdose, it becomes a community problem then, and it has to be addressed.
All right. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next item on the list? All right. Well, number 9, we're almost near the end here, but number 9, mom events that are held only during the day.
Yes. Oh man, this one I loved.
Well, go ahead then.
So, Mothers of Preschoolers, MOPS, is a national organization, and we started a MOPS group at Redeemer because there was one mom in particular that really wanted a mom's group, and the previous one was during the day. And so I signed us up for MOPS, but before I did that, I looked at the other MOPS and groups in the area, and all of them were during the day. Well, this particular mom worked during the day, and she was willing to head this up. So we did an evening group, and it is still going strong. And even the moms that don't work outside the home appreciated having an evening thing they could go to, give the dad some parenting time, or if there wasn't a dad in the picture, then we had childcare available. And they have become a tight group. They have become a life group, and they expanded to the Moms Next. And so now they include moms at all stages, and And that I love MOPS because it includes mentor moms. So it wasn't just mothers of preschoolers that you needed in this group. You needed the mentor moms that were long past the preschool years, and it would not have done as well as it has if it had been held during the day, even if it had been held on a Saturday, because moms need to get stuff done on Saturdays. So I think it's very important. It's like the previous one we just talked about, is knowing your community, knowing who you're reaching. And still an issue in the church I'm at today. And it most of our people are retired, so it's fine. But then we're not going to get any new ones if we're trying to get some younger ones that work during the day. So
Right. And I think we can look at that even more internally within, my experience has been sometimes our own women's ministries in the church, our UMW, always talk about, we're not reaching any of the new younger moms, but yet you're always having your meetings at 1:00 on a Tuesday afternoon or something like that. And well, those moms are working, and how about you have an evening event or an evening circle or something like that? And sometimes it's just fighting that tradition and fighting. Well, it's no one wants to come out late, after it's dark or something like that. And it's that battle that is out there of, and I think sometimes it comes down to that. That we want to support and encourage these mothers and these moms, but yet we don't want to change the way we do things because it's going to inconvenience us.
Still want to do it on our own terms.
Right.
Keep the old food out of our pantry.
Right.
Well, I mean, my wife has experienced this. I mean, our children are adults now and out of the house, but my wife, as a pastor's wife, experienced this because, it's like, oh, they want the pastor's wife to be a part of something, but she works. And then when do they schedule it? During the day. At my last church, it would come time to be like, okay, well, let's decorate the church for Christmas time. And since, my wife's creative, they wanted her input and what. And so then when did they schedule it? Like Monday afternoon. And she's like, I can't do that because I have to work. And yet it's like, oh, okay, well, as opposed to going, well, when would it work? When could you be here? It was like, well, maybe if you could just, tell Matt your ideas or maybe write them down for us and we'll see if we can make it work.
No.
It's hard in terms of like, then you get people who then become, I guess, maybe upset, I don't know, or resentful because the pastor's wife's not participating, and it's like, but yet you're not taking her life into account. You're only taking yours into account, where it's, again, the convenience of, well, because most of you are retired. Yeah, it works that you can meet in the afternoon, but you can't get upset with my wife because she's still working and then can't be there when you want her to be.
Right.
Such is life, they say, right?
Right.
All right. Well, then we get to the final item on this list. Number 10 on 10 church activities that need to go. It says surface level sermons. Get rid of the sermon? What? Are you crazy? No, I'm not crazy. And no, I'm not just hoping for a 15-minute church service. The real issue is the format of the sermons. So I'm going to just read this to share what this writer is getting at here. It says, think about it. When was the last time you experienced a long-lasting life change as the result of someone talking to you? Probably a while ago, if at all. With attention spans barely long enough to read a tweet, how much of your current sermon is actually sinking in? I mean, even colleges are moving away from lecture-based teaching, so why not churches? You can still have your pastor up front on Sundays, but instead of just talking, he or she can lead experiences. Lectures could be replaced by an environment where people are free to talk and ask questions. You could even try sitting people at tables to better encourage discussions. These are the types of moments that create the biggest impact.
Woo! Maybe some fill in the blanks.
Right.
Ah,
I don't know. I kind of struggle with this one.
Yeah,
yeah.
that is a hard one.
Um,
That would be a great new church start. That would be a great if that was the way the church was going to start off in that. But I think our churches are so into the way we do it 100 years ago that would be a hard one to break.
It would be a new service at least.
Right,
Right.
exactly. That's what I mean. If you've been new start or some kind of, it would have just to get the feel for it for the people. I think if you automatically just said this way we're going to start doing it,
Oh yeah, no.
we're gonna. But if you started, it was like, we're going to start another service. It's going to be a new start, a new way to do things, and this is the way we're going to do it. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be a Sunday evening. It could be a different evening of the week.
Right.
Serve a dinner, have something. There's so many ways you can make it creative, make it exciting to do it that way. Absolutely.
well, I know clergy when I started that, they thought like 10 minutes was a long sermon. And I'm thinking, how can you get your point across, or
Right.
how can you even convey anything in 10 minutes and feel like you did what you needed to?
It's a Catholic homily.
So I mean, I'm really struggling with this one, and the fact that I guess when she says surface level, to me, I'm just thinking like, well, yeah, if there isn't any meat to it, well,
Right.
then I'm not interested in that either. But, if you're giving deep, meaningful words, I guess, for people to think about when they leave, then I guess, I don't know. I'm struggling
I think
with
this
this
is where fill in the blank would actually be useful, and it would be, you could create a fill in the blank based on your message, and then have people use that as a starting off point for a smaller group discussion later in the week. But even the talk back portion, people want to talk back in service, even ones that are used to traditional style church, but especially the ones that are unchurched or aren't as familiar with church. I have a younger couple, they're in their 30s, that have become members of Hope, and I have to be careful when I ask a question during my message, because the guy will answer and he'll want to have a conversation during my message, and I would love to, except that's not how we're set up. So how to balance that, and they sit up front. So, but he legitimately wants his questions answered. And we don't have a small group process right now, or yeah.
So let me ask you this though. Have you ever put a question in your message looking for an answer and then get nothing?
Oh yes.
And then you're like,
Crickets.
moving on,
Just like, my God, hello.
Maybe they didn't hear me. Let me repeat that again.
Yes, had that too.
And I agree with everything you guys have said, especially with this idea that it would need to be a new, I think, to try and transition your current worship into this would be very difficult.
Yeah.
One, because right now we're also focused too on how things look online and sound online, and
Right.
how do you do that with an online stream service?
Right.
I think there's definitely, we've talked in smaller settings, one-on-one with, each of us, how we're all, experiencing at different levels. People are really striving and hungry for these conversations.
Yes.
And they have questions. And we need to be able to create time and space for these questions to be brought forth and have conversation around them. And so I think there's definitely something to work with here. But I agree with what you guys have said, that to try and make this, and it's, making this institutional shift in how we do things would be very difficult. I think there could be little changes we could make in our preaching that would, And I've done it before where it's like you start off with a question, you say, well, just take a few minutes and talk to someone in your pew about this.
Yeah.
You wait a minute and you circle back and, those kind of things. So
that's a good idea.
I've done that, at my last church. I did that a couple of times where it was like, I intentionally, said, here, take a minute and talk to your neighbor, and then brought them back in to see what some of the responses were at that point,
right,
versus just trying to throw out a question and,
crickets.
Yeah. Oh, and that would work online too, especially if you had someone who was monitoring your online comments,
right,
for people to
Yes.
have those discussions in the comments.
So on a side tangent to that thought though, Kim, isn't it interesting? And I don't know, maybe I'm the only one experiencing this, but it's like people trying to keep their anonymity while watching online. Like they don't want you to know they're watching. Like they're watching, but they don't want you to know. Or it's like, hey, go ahead and throw your response in the comments or what. And, you get the same 2 or 3 people that do it, which I'm thankful for. But at the same time, most people, it's like they still don't even want to. It's like, no, then they'll know I'm watching,
right.
Or it's like,
and Jackie could speak better to this, but that's how the Ready to Launch using Nona Jones' book operates, is you have a private group for your worship service. So it's not, so people, I think, would feel more comfortable in that environment, because you do become a church in that environment. And Jackie can speak more to that.
I know you said it, you just, it's that you kind of get the conversation going online. So instead of just asking a question from the pulpit, you've got that person, say your campus director, or what do you want to call them, that's, hey, did you hear that? What does that make you feel? And I do the same thing even from the pulpit. I'll ask the question, and yes, you get crickets, but this is how I feel about it. This is how I would go about it. And I'll get nodding and that, like, oh, so I'm not alone here then. And then they kind of laugh about it, but then you got to be ready to fill in your own blanks. That's the part where, or people will be like, or sometimes I'll throw it off and I'll be like, well, this is the way I feel. Anybody feel like that? And they're like, oh gosh, no way. You'll get that look at, so it's kind of that, oh, I was wondering if anybody was awake out here today. And, I do it as a funny thing, but it was just kind of like, just making sure you're all listening. So, think of different ways like that. And I'll get emails throughout the week, like, hey, I liked that question. I liked how you did it, but this is how I'm feeling. They don't want to do it. People don't want it to stand up in front of there. And again, it's knowing your demographics, knowing your audience. There's no way I could bring that to the Claire situation, Claire church of, we're going to start bringing in tables and we're going to do it. No way would that fly at the church there. But I know churches that, we know people that could do that in a heartbeat and not even flinch, and their church would be all over it. I mean, it's a great thing, but it's just something you got to know your demographics. There's, you got to tweak it to your demographics and things. Yeah.
So to the Facebook conversation, I love it. When I would do like a live video during the week, and I just like to say hello to people. And so then, especially somebody who's new to Facebook Live, it's like they pop up, oh, hey, Jackie, thanks for joining me. And then they disappear like right away. Like you see their name, and then, the number goes up on your live viewers, and then it goes down as soon as you say hi to somebody, because they're like, oh crap, how'd they know I was watching? Or
right.
It's like, no, I don't want them talking to me,
Right.
I was called out by the pastor.
All he said was hi. I'm sorry.
It is. It's just how people are. And it takes a while. And it takes a while to build that trust. And, I know that from, a previous church I was at, that, it took a while. At first it was kind of like, hi, so-and-so, well, hi, so-and-so, and they're saying hi to each other, but then it was like, it went away real quick. But I mean, it took a while for them to build. It took a good year to build up those comments to start coming in and that. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot more than these 10 items that we have discussed over 2 episodes that could be on here. It could be a top 20 or a top 50 list, I'm sure, if we dug hard enough. But before we wrap up this week's episode, I wanted to give everybody a chance for any final thoughts on these activities that need to go according to this author, or anything to say based on today's conversation?
I think we just need to not be afraid to try something new. We need to know our context, our demographics, and not be afraid. Just try something new. If it doesn't work, then we can go back to what we've always done. But
Right.
it's good to evaluate what we're doing and see if it's still relevant.
Yeah, I think it's just so important to just listen to what your community is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really, have that time to connect with them and listen to them, and they will tell you what the needs of the community are, of what your neighborhood is, and then how can we meet those needs.
Pastor Jackie, anything you want to add?
Nothing real. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. It's just, try something new and just investigate what's going on in your communities.
Don't be afraid to fail too.
Yes, that's a good one, Curtis. Very good one. Because, I can't tell you how many times I've skinned my knees,
Yep. Don't be afraid to fail.
I'm in the Jen Hatmaker book club, and this is September's book, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And I've had it for a long time. I just haven't read it. And I'm about to leave and do the devotion at today's staff meeting at Green Street. But I'm using the introduction from Daring Greatly for that. But it basically says we must dare to show up and let ourselves be seen. And that's what we need to do. We need to not be afraid to fail and dare greatly.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts and for today's discussion. And we hope those of you that have joined us to watch this episode enjoy what we had to share. And as always, we want to invite you to continue the discussion, whether it be with us in your own congregations or with those just keep talking, keep it going, and build on those relationships. And of course, remember the one important relationship that we always need to build upon each and every day of our lives. And we hope to see you again next time. But until then, peace be with you.